My name is Eleanor May Whitmore. I am 78 years old, a retired librarian from Willow Creek, a quiet town just outside Sacramento. My husband Harold passed away 12 years ago, and since then I've poured myself into one thing: family. Every casserole baked, every quilt sewn, every dollar saved from my modest pension, it all went into building memories for my children and grandchildren. That's why when the message came, it didn't feel real. It was late, 11:46 p.m. I had just finished folding the last batch of beach towels I'd embroidered with each grandchild's initials. The TV flickered softly in the background, a rerun of The Golden Girls I wasn't paying attention to. My phone buzzed on the table. First I smiled. Maybe it was a thank you. Maybe it was a late-night question about packing. I slipped my glasses down from my forehead and opened the text. It was from my daughter, Cynthia. "Mom, we've decided it's best if you don't come. The kids are excited for a simple family trip. Just us. Please understand. You've done more than enough already." The words blurred before my eyes. My hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I read it again, slower this time, as if maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, there was in black and white. After months of planning, paying deposits, making calls, staying up late comparing flight times and villa rentals, they didn't want me there. I looked at the suitcase by the door, neatly zipped, ready to go. Inside were 2 cotton dresses I hadn't worn since Harold was alive, a sun hat with a ribbon Cynthia once said made me look cheerful, and a photo of Harold I planned to set on the table during our first dinner together. I had imagined us all saying a few words in his memory while the waves crashed behind us. But I wasn't invited. The phone buzzed again. Second message. "Don't take it personally, Mom. It's just easier this way." Easier. I felt my throat tighten, my breath shallow. For 78 years I had been many things. Daughter, wife, mother, grandmother. But at that moment, in my own living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, I felt invisible. I pushed back my chair slowly, the wooden legs scraping against the linoleum floor. My chest was heavy, but my mind was racing. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, but a spark I hadn't felt in years. I walked toward the hallway, each step steady, deliberate, like a drumbeat echoing in the silence. When I reached my desk in the den, I opened the drawer where I kept Harold's old leather ledger. Inside was the truth that Cynthia didn't seem to remember. The entire trip, the flights, the villa, the excursions, the car rentals, all of it had been booked under one name: Eleanor May Whitmore. And as I ran my fingers over the stack of receipts, the thought struck me with the sharpness of broken glass. Tomorrow morning, when they boarded that plane, they might find themselves holding tickets that led nowhere. The night felt endless, though the clock only moved an hour forward. I sat at my desk with Harold's ledger open, the yellowed pages filled with neat numbers and notes in his careful handwriting. My hand rested on the receipts, each one a reminder of how I'd scraped together this dream. Had started small. An old mason jar I kept hidden behind the flour canister in the kitchen. I called it my dream jar. Whenever I skipped something, a slice of pie at the diner, a new pair of slippers, even my favorite lavender tea, I'd take the cash and slip it into that jar. $5 here, 10 there. Over months it grew. Over years it became a fund. And when the jar was too full, I marched it down to the bank and opened a savings account in my name. I remember the teller smiling when she saw me clutching that jar. "Vacation fund?" she asked. I nodded, cheeks warm with pride. "For my family. For one last big trip before I'm gone." That was 10 years ago. Since then, I sold Harold's old tools, took on tutoring jobs at the library, even crocheted blankets for church fundraisers to earn a little extra. Every cent went into that account. It was meant for laughter under palm trees, for sandy feet on wooden porches, for my grandchildren to remember me not just as the woman who rocked them to sleep, but as the woman who gave them paradise, even if just for a week. And yet, with one text, Cynthia turned me from a dreamer into a fool. I closed the ledger gently, almost tenderly, like I was tucking Harold in for the night. Then I stared at the laptop screen, the banking portal glowing softly. My name blinked at the top. Account holder, Eleanor May Whitmore. Beneath it, the balance. $18,542.77. Enough to cover the villa, the flights, the excursions, all already booked. The cursor hovered over a single option. Freeze account. My finger rested on the mouse. Just one click, and everything would unravel for them. But my breath caught and I pulled back. Because behind the anger, behind the sting of being excluded, another thought began to take root. What if this wasn't the end of my dream? What if it was the beginning of something else? The house creaked around me, the quiet settling heavy on my shoulders. I turned in my chair and looked toward the darkened hallway, where the mason jar still sat, half empty now, but still glowing faintly in the light from the den. And that was when the idea first whispered itself into my mind. Soft, dangerous, thrilling. Maybe the trip didn't belong to them anymore. Maybe it belonged to me. Didn't happen all at once. Families don't unravel like that. No, it's always in small threads, pulled loose so quietly you barely notice until the fabric is gone. I remember the first time I felt it. Thanksgiving 4 years ago. I had baked 3 pies, the kind Harold loved. Pumpkin, apple, and pecan. Cynthia walked in with a store-bought cheesecake and announced, "Kids, let's get a picture before we eat." They huddled together, Cynthia and her husband Paul, their 3 children, and even Paul's parents who had just flown in from Denver. I stood there with the pies still steaming on the counter, smiling, waiting for someone to wave me in. But no one did. When I asked, Cynthia laughed. "Oh, Mom, let's just do one with the kids this time." One with the kids, one without me. Christmas, it was the sweaters. Everyone wore red with little white pine trees. Mine was blue, because no one told me there had been a plan. I sat in the group photo anyway, but when the picture went on Facebook, my part had been cropped out. I didn't say anything. I just pressed like, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered again the next summer when Cynthia stopped asking me to host birthdays. She began saying things like, "It's easier at our house," or "The kids prefer Dad's side of the family." I brought gifts, I brought food. I clapped as the candles were blown out. But sometimes I caught her looking at me, not through me, but past me, like I was a stranger standing too close. Paul wasn't any better. He had a way of correcting me in front of the kids, as though my stories about Harold's fishing trips or our honeymoon in Galveston were just old people's chatter. "Don't bore them, Eleanor," he'd say with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. And Cynthia, she never defended me. She just folded into his silence like it was safer there. The worst part wasn't being excluded. It was how natural they made it look. Like I was fading out of the frame, one gathering at a time. Still I stayed hopeful. I told myself, this trip will fix it. Once we're all in the same place, laughing, remembering Harold, it will bring us together again. I clung to that like a lifeline. But that text at 11:46 p.m. cut the rope clean through. I thought about Harold then, about the way he used to say, "Ellie, don't you ever let anyone tell you your worth. You know it better than they do." His voice rang in my head, steady, sure. And that was when another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. The last conversation Harold and I had before he died. His hand had been thin, fragile, but his eyes sharp. He'd whispered, "If they ever forget who you are, make them remember." The words came back to me now, louder than the hum of the fridge, stronger than the ache in my chest. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Power. The morning after that text, I woke up before the sun. Old habits. Harold always liked his coffee before dawn. And even now, I still brewed 2 cups. One for me, one for the memory of him. I sat at the kitchen table with my planner, the one no one ever asked about, the one Cynthia assumed was full of knitting dates and doctor appointments. But inside it were the bookings, the flights, the villa in Naples, the excursion tickets, even the reservation at that little cliffside restaurant Cynthia had been bragging about for months. All of it was under my name, my card, my rules. I flipped through each page slowly, like I was handling glass. Each confirmation number was a reminder that while they had excluded me, I was the only reason this trip existed at all. They thought I was baggage. They didn't realize I was the luggage tag, the thing that made sure their whole journey arrived safely. I remembered the tone in Cynthia's voice, sharp with irritation. "You're lucky we even brought you." Those words had clung to me like smoke. But now, as I traced the ink of my handwriting, I almost laughed. Because the truth was, they hadn't brought me anywhere. I had brought them. By noon, Cynthia called. She sounded cheerful, syrupy in the way people do when they want something. "Mom, I was just thinking about the Amalfi Day trip. Did you make sure to book the driver? We don't want to be scrambling." I could hear Paul in the background saying something about boat rentals. They weren't asking me. They were depending on me, though they'd never admit it. "Yes," I said softly. "Everything's taken care of." There was a pause. I imagined her nodding, relieved, but also slightly annoyed that I hadn't fumbled. Part of her wanted me to fail, to prove her story about me being too
Eleanor
old, too forgetful,
I am 78 years old,
unnecessary.
a retired librarian from
But I
Willow
wasn't
Creek,
going
a
to
quiet
fail.
town just outside
That night,
Sacramento.
I pulled out Harold's old leather folder, the one we used for important documents. Inside was the resort paperwork. And tucked into that, a clause Cynthia didn't know existed. The kind of detail only someone with a stake in the property would see.
My name is
Guest
Eleanor May
privileges,
Whitmore. I am 78 years
cancellations,
old, a retired
grades,
librarian
transfers,
from Willow Creek, a quiet
all at
town
my
just
discretion.
outside Sacramento.
I held the paper between my fingers, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Felt deliberate. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about reminding myself that I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a shadow at the edge of their photographs. I was the frame. And if I chose, I could tilt the whole picture. It started with little things. The airline had offered me the option to rearrange seating. I switched Cynthia and Paul's seats so they were in the row behind me. Their kids scattered a bit further. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make Cynthia whisper, "That's strange, I thought we booked together." I sipped my ginger ale on the flight and pretended not to notice. At the villa, I made another adjustment. The largest bedroom, the one with the ocean view, had originally been reserved for Cynthia and Paul. I changed it to my name. When the host handed me the keys and pointed me upstairs, Cynthia's smile faltered for just a second before she caught herself. "Oh," she said too brightly. "I guess we'll make the best of the garden room." I nodded, as though it hadn't been deliberate. "Yes, the garden room is lovely." At dinner that night, they all sat talking about boat rides and shopping, and I sat quietly watching. Paul ordered wine for the table without asking me, then filled everyone's glass except mine. He smirked like it was a joke, but Cynthia laughed too quickly, like she didn't want to question it. I didn't say a word. I simply excused myself early, leaving my plate half-finished. Back in my room, I called the excursion desk. The boat tour they were looking forward to. I moved the reservation from Saturday morning to Monday afternoon, when I knew Paul had a business call scheduled back home. He'd have to miss it. Small adjustments. Nothing loud, nothing obvious. But every shift reminded me. I wasn't at their mercy. They were at mine. I thought about Harold again, about how he used to play chess with the kids. He'd always tell them, "The game is won in the quiet moves, not the flashy ones." And that's exactly what I was doing now. Cynthia noticed. She didn't say it, but I caught her watching me across the table at breakfast. Eyes narrowed just slightly, as though she was trying to figure out whether I was behind the disruptions. But she wouldn't dare ask. To accuse me would be to admit she needed me. The children, though, they still smiled at me. Little hands tugging at my sleeve, asking me to tell stories about Harold, to show them how to build card houses or fold napkins into swans. They didn't see me as a burden. Not yet. And that, more than anything, gave me the patience to keep weaving my plan. They thought they were pushing me out. But inch by inch, I was moving them exactly where I wanted. The first confrontation came sooner than I expected. We were at breakfast on the third morning, the kind where the air smelled of oranges and fresh bread, sunlight spilling through wide windows. Cynthia was tapping on her phone, scrolling through the itinerary she'd proudly printed weeks ago, as if she'd arranged any of it. "Mom," she said suddenly, her tone clipped. "The driver says the Amalfi tour was pushed to Monday. Did you do that?" The table went silent. Paul's fork froze midair. The kids stopped squabbling over jam. I folded my napkin neatly in my lap before answering. "Yes, I thought it would work better." Paul leaned back. His voice edged with that mock-patient tone he always used on me. "But I had a call Monday. You knew that." I met his eyes calmly. "Yes, I did." His smile faltered. For the first time there was a pause. He wasn't used to me being direct. He was used to me apologizing, shrinking, smoothing things over. Cynthia jumped in quickly, a laugh too sharp to be real. "Well, Mom, maybe next time just check with us, okay? We had things planned." I stirred my tea slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I said almost softly, "You're welcome." Cynthia blinked. "Welcome. For organizing all of this," I said, gesturing around. "The villa, the meals, the excursions. Without me, you wouldn't be here at all." The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. Paul opened his mouth, then closed it. Cynthia pressed her lips together, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the ground to stand on. The children, bless them, broke the tension. My granddaughter, Anna, reached across and squeezed my hand. "Grandma, I like when you plan things. You always make it fun." That small hand in mine, so warm, so trusting, was the anchor I needed. I smiled at Anna, then looked back at her parents. Plans change sometimes. You'll adjust. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was final. Paul shoved his chair back a little harder than necessary. Cynthia avoided my gaze, retreating into her coffee cup. But I saw it, the flicker of realization. For the first time they understood. I wasn't just a passenger on this trip. I was the captain. And the quietest one at the table was the one holding the map.
The confrontation at breakfast had left the air heavy, like a storm that hadn't yet broken. Cynthia and Paul kept their smiles pasted on, but their laughter was thinner, their movements sharper. They were unsettled, and they didn't know what to do with it. The children, though, were another story. That afternoon, while Cynthia and Paul argued quietly on the terrace about reservations and responsibilities, I sat cross-legged on the floor of the villa's sitting room with the three little ones. We built castles out of playing cards, towers that leaned dangerously but held fast when we placed the final card. "Grandma," Anna whispered as we worked, "Mom says you don't understand things anymore. But you do. You make the best castles." Her words pierced deeper than she knew. I kissed her forehead and whispered back, "Sometimes grown-ups forget what really matters." Later I told them stories about Harold, about how he taught me to fish, how we once got caught in a storm on the lake and laughed all the way back to shore. Their eyes lit up, wide and eager, as though the memory of him lived stronger through me than through their own parents. By evening, when Cynthia came to collect them for bed, they clung to me. "Can Grandma tuck us in tonight?" they begged. Cynthia's face tightened, but she forced a smile. "Just for tonight," she said, her voice brittle. She didn't realize that every moment I spent with them was a thread binding them closer to me, loosening her hold without me having to say a word. Meanwhile, I made another quiet move. I had the concierge adjust tomorrow's dinner reservation. Instead of the glamorous cliffside restaurant Cynthia had been talking about for weeks, I switched it to a modest trattoria in town, the kind of place Harold and I would have chosen. Homey, warm, alive with the smell of garlic and laughter. When Cynthia discovered it, she bristled. "Mom, this isn't what we planned." Smile. Plans change. The children will love this one more. And they did. They ate spaghetti with sauce on their cheeks, giggling as the owner brought out free gelato. The locals adored them, and for once, everyone seemed happy. Everyone except Cynthia and Paul, who sat stiffly at the end of the table, out of rhythm with the joy around them. That night, as I tucked Anna into bed, she whispered, "Grandma, don't let them send you away. I like when you're here." Her words settled into me like an oath. They might try to push me out, but not while I still held the map, the plans, and the children's hearts. Slowly, piece by piece, I was shifting the balance. And if Cynthia and Paul didn't see it yet, they soon would. Tea happened on the fourth evening. The sun was melting into the horizon, the sky painted in streaks of pink and gold. We had just returned from the trattoria, laughter from the children still echoing in the halls, when Cynthia finally broke. She cornered me in the kitchen, away from the others. Her voice was low at first, controlled, but her eyes were sharp. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk." I rinsed my teacup, letting the water run over porcelain, calm as ever. "Yes, dear." She folded her arms. "You're undermining us." The words hung heavy. I dried the cup, placed it neatly in the rack. "Undermining you? How?" "The reservations, changes, the control." Her voice trembled on that last word, though she tried to harden it. This trip was supposed to be about family.
My
And
name is
instead
Eleanor
you're
May
making it
Whitmore.
about yourself.
I am 78 years
I
old,
turned
a
to
retired
face her,
librarian
steady
from Willow
and
Creek,
quiet.
a quiet town just
"Cynthia,
outside
without me,
Sacramento.
this trip wouldn't exist. You didn't plan it. You didn't pay for it. You didn't even lift a finger. And yet you're angry because I won't fade into the background." Her face flushed red, a mix of embarrassment and fury. "That's not fair. You don't understand. Paul and you," I interrupted softly, "want me to be invisible. But I won't be." Her composure slipped then. Her voice rose, sharp enough for the children upstairs to hear if they were awake. "You don't get it, Mom. You're not the center anymore. Extra. We bring you along out of courtesy, not necessity." There it was. The truth stripped bare. For a moment, I simply stood there, my hand resting on the counter. Then I leaned in slightly, my voice a whisper but stronger than her shout. "No, Cynthia. You're here because of me. You're eating, sleeping, laughing in Italy because I allowed it. Don't forget that." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her hands trembled at her sides. For once, she had no rebuttal. I left her standing there, walking upstairs to tuck the children in, my steps steady, unhurried. As I kissed Anna goodnight, I thought of Harold's words again. "If they ever forget who you are, make them remember." And tonight, Cynthia had remembered. But remembering was only the beginning. Paul was never one for subtlety. Where Cynthia used sharp smiles and carefully chosen words, Paul preferred blunt edges. He didn't like games he couldn't control, and by now, he had realized I was playing one he couldn't quite see. It began the next morning at breakfast. He sat across from me, his jaw set, his tone just a little too casual. "Eleanor, I've been looking over the bookings. You know, just to make sure everything's running smoothly." Cynthia kept her eyes fixed on her plate, pretending to butter toast. I looked at him evenly. "And?" He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Well, I noticed all the confirmations are under your name. That could cause issues. What if you forget something? Or worse, what if something happens? Wouldn't it make more sense for me to take over?" The arrogance of it almost made me laugh. He wanted the keys to the kingdom, without admitting that I had built it. I stirred sugar into my tea. "Do you know the concierge's extension by heart, Paul?" the cancellation clauses, the villa's deposit schedule. His silence was answer enough. I leaned in slightly, my voice calm but edged with steel. Then tell me, how exactly would you take over? The children giggled from their end of the table, oblivious to the tension. Cynthia shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he'd back down. But Paul wasn't the type. He pushed again. Look, Eleanor, you're 72. This is a lot to manage. Mistakes happen at your age. Maybe it's better for everyone if you let the next generation handle things. I met his stare and smiled faintly. Funny, because so far, the only mistakes have been yours. He stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Your business call you missed. The boat tour. The dinner you didn't enjoy. All because you assumed you were in control. But you weren't. Cynthia's fork clinked against her plate. She shot him a warning look, silently begging him to stop. But pride wouldn't let him. Fine, he snapped. Then don't expect us to follow your lead forever. We'll make our own arrangements if we have to. I set my cup down, the porcelain making the smallest, sharpest sound against the saucer. Then you'll discover quickly that without me, doors here won't open. Phones won't answer. Reservations won't hold. For the first time I saw it in his eyes, doubt. He wanted to push me out, but deep down he knew I was right. And as I stood to leave the table, Anna slipped her hand into mine, choosing me over him without hesitation. Power isn't just about money or names on paper. Sometimes it's about loyalty. And in that moment I had more of it than Paul ever would. The tension had built like a storm pressing against the villa's walls, and by the last night, there was no holding it back. Dinner was meant to be celebratory, the grand meal overlooking the sea. Cynthia had dressed carefully, her hair pinned just so, as though appearances might save her. Paul was quieter than usual, his eyes darting between me and the menu, searching for an opening. The children sat restless, sensing the weight in the air even if they didn't understand it. The waiter poured wine. I declined, sipping water instead. I wanted my mind clear. Halfway through the meal, Paul leaned forward. His voice was calm but sharp. Eleanor, we appreciate everything you've done. But after this trip, things need to change. You can't keep holding control over the family like this. It's not healthy. Cynthia nodded quickly, her voice softer but no less pointed. Mom, we love you, but it's time to let go. We're capable of leading this family. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. The words were polished, rehearsed, but the cracks showed. They weren't asking, they were cornering me. I set down my fork and folded my hands neatly on the table. You think this is about control? About me proving myself? I reached into my bag and laid a leather folder on the table. Harold's folder. The one with the resort papers, the bookings, the shares. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it, sliding the documents toward them. Paul's eyes flickered across the pages. His face drained of color. Cynthia's hand trembled as she read, her lips parting in shock. 8%, I said softly. I own 8% of this resort. The villa, the tours, the restaurants. Every luxury you've enjoyed this week has been under my authority. You weren't doing me a favor by bringing me. I was doing one for you. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint clinking of cutlery from other tables. Paul tried to recover, forcing a thin smile. That's impressive, Eleanor. But money doesn't change. Money. I cut him off, my voice steady, low, carrying further than his. This isn't about money. This is about respect. About family. About remembering who held you when you were children, who sacrificed, who built the life you take for granted. Cynthia's eyes filled, though whether from shame or anger, I couldn't tell. Mom, she whispered. I leaned closer, my tone final. You don't get to erase me from photographs. You don't get to treat me like an afterthought. Not when I built the frame you stand in. Anna slipped from her chair and wrapped her arms around me, her small voice breaking the silence. "Grandma, you'll always be part of the picture." And in that moment I knew I had won. Not with money, not with papers, but with truth. Paul sat back, defeated. Cynthia stared down at the folder, tears sliding silently onto the tablecloth. The storm had broken, and the air felt cleaner for it. I finished my meal in peace, Harold's words echoing inside me. "If they ever forget who you are, make them remember." And now they would never forget again.